All right, today we are doing a scientific deep dive into how a specific type of water could seriously impact athletic performance. We're going way beyond just quenching your thirst. We're talking about hacking your body's chemistry at the molecular level.
You know the feeling, right? If you're an athlete or even just really serious about your fitness, you've been there. You're putting in the work, you're grinding it out, but you just hit that plateau. Your performance flatlines, and man, recovery just seems to take forever. It's super frustrating.
So, what if the answer isn't just another brutal training session? What if it's something as fundamental as the water you're drinking? The research we're digging into today suggests a huge shift in focus, away from just the quality of your training to the quality of your hydration.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at what supposedly makes this water so different. Then, we'll dive into how it can actually power up your performance and slash your recovery time. And finally, we'll get into why the source material makes the case for this being an essential system for any athlete's home.
So let's kick things off with the basics. Look, we are not just talking about regular tap water or bottled water here. The sources we're examining frame this as a legit scientific tool, a real biohack built from the ground up for athletes.
So it's known commercially as Kangen Water, but the scientific term you'll see is alkaline ionized water, or AIW. And according to this research, it's really positioned as a performance-enhancing tool, not just something to drink when you're thirsty. That distinction is absolutely key to understanding everything else we're about to cover.
And these claims aren't just pulled out of thin air. The foundation here comes from human clinical trials, registered with the NIH, by the way. In these studies, they took healthy volunteers and put them through some seriously strenuous high-intensity interval training, HIIT workouts, to see how their bodies would respond.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty. How exactly does this water supposedly power up your peak performance? Well, the research points to two main things: cranking up your cellular energy and seriously boosting your endurance. First up, we've got to talk about mitochondria. The easiest way to think about these are as the little microscopic engines inside every single one of your cells. They're the power plants, and their job is to create ATP, which is the raw metabolic energy that fuels basically every single move you make.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The lab test showed that this water actually upregulates the activity of these cellular engines. So what's the benefit for you? Well, it means your body can naturally produce more of its own energy, giving you a major boost in both physical and mental vitality. It's like turning up the power.
All right, that's energy. But the second part of peak performance is all about oxygen. And for that, we need to talk about hemoglobin. This is the protein in your red blood cells that basically acts like a fleet of delivery trucks, grabbing oxygen from your lungs and rushing it to your muscles when they're screaming for it.
So back to those clinical trials. The researchers found that the athletes drinking this water showed statistically significant, and I mean, that's a big deal in science, increases in their hemoglobin. The direct athletic benefit? Your blood can physically carry more oxygen to your muscles and get rid of that performance-killing CO2 faster.
So let's put it all together. You've got more energy being produced at the cellular level, and you've got more oxygen being delivered to your muscles. The claimed result is pretty powerful. Better endurance, you can push off fatigue for longer, and you get a much better cardiovascular response when you're really pushing your limits.
But look, we all know that performance is only half the battle. What happens after the workout is just as important, if not more so. So let's switch gears and talk about the second huge area of focus from this research: speeding up your recovery by tackling soreness and inflammation head-on.
This comparison really lays it all out. On the left, you've got the standard post-workout misery, the lactic acid burn, that dreaded delayed onset muscle soreness, and just a long, slow recovery. But on the right, the data suggests a totally different story. A faster return to normal lactate levels, more blood platelets to kickstart healing, and a heavy reduction in that post-workout soreness.
And the researchers had a great way of summing this up. In simple terms, what they're saying is that your body is basically primed and ready to start repairing the damage from your workout sooner. It's a proactive approach to recovery, not a reactive one.
But as important as all that is, it might not even be the biggest deal when it comes to recovery. The source material points to something even more profound, something happening deep down at the molecular level.
They describe it as activating what they call the body's ultimate defense mechanism against all that stress from your workouts.
And that mechanism is an incredibly powerful enzyme called superoxide dismutase, or just SOD for short.
Now listen, this was highlighted as maybe the single most significant finding of the entire study. They reported that drinking this water triggered a dramatic rise in SOD, which they describe as the body's most powerful internal antioxidant enzyme. That's a huge statement.
So, okay, big fancy enzyme name. What does activating it actually do for you as an athlete? Well, according to the study, it tamps down on that inflammatory response from exercise. It cuts down on the release of these inflammatory cells called cytokines, and it acts as your body's #1 defender against tissue damage from free radicals.
Okay, this all brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. Now that we've seen the science on performance and recovery, let's tie it all together into the final big takeaway from this research, the actual case for having this system in your own home.
And this is maybe the most important mindset shift. Based on all this data, the argument is that you shouldn't think of this system as just a fancy water filter. You should reframe it as an active sports recovery device, just as essential as your running shoes, your weights, or your foam roller.
So let's just sum it all up. The verdict for athletes, based on these clinical trials, is that bringing this water into your routine helps you upregulate that cellular energy, boost your blood's oxygen delivery, drastically cut down on muscle soreness, and shield your body with that ultimate antioxidant defense from SOD.
Which really leaves us with one final and kind of provocative question to think about. Based on this body of research, is it possible that your standard hydration strategy, the regular tap water you drink every single day, is actually holding you back? Is it leaving your true potential on the table? That's what this deep dive really invites you to consider.